Now, Australia is not immune from the so-called culture wars waged by the left and designed to degrade Western values and ideals. Not only are we not immune, we are very much victims of the left's long march through the institutions. But there is a fight back. This week, the IPA launched the Centre for the Australian Way of Life. Joining me now is the Executive Director at the Institute of Public Affairs, John Roskam. John, thank you for your time. What aspects of the Australian way of life are under threat and need protection?
Hello, Rita. What needs to be protected is the idea that Australia is a fair country, a free country, that we are a great democracy, that in these challenging times we have to have a pride in our country. We have to understand what has happened in the past, but we have to be unified going forward, and we can't teach an entire generation of young people to be ashamed of this nation. That is not good for social cohesion. It is not for good for us as a community, and it is not good for us in the uncertain times that we face ahead.
Now, we just heard from a doctor in Ukraine about the spirit of the local people, how they are confident that they're going to prevail and then they want to fight to defend their nation. But that's not necessarily the case here in the US, with the polling showing that only around 1 in 2 people think we're worth fighting for, that they would stay and fight if we were invaded.
Rita, that's exactly right. So over the weekend, the IPA commissioned a poll of 1,000 Australians. About 55% of Australians across the board said that if we were in the same position as the Ukrainians, they would stay and fight. But there was roughly 25% of people who said they would flee, and the rest were unsure. So that doesn't engender confidence. But most alarming about that poll is that the majority of young people under the age of 35, and it extends to that age, would not stay and fight. They would flee. It's only as you get older, it is only in the over 55 age group that you have a majority of people saying, I believe in this country, I'm committed to this country, I will stay and defend it. And for me, that's a product of 30 years of, in simple terms speaking, frankly, telling young people to be ashamed of the country that they live in. And these are now the consequences. We are not the Ukrainians. We have big challenges ahead.
Well, I just find it astonishing that you would have those figures, because you would think people would be a little bit ashamed of saying, I would flee. So that number may be actually smaller than what the reality would be if they were faced with that. But to have those figures, people freely admitting to, yes, I'd rather flee than stay and fight. Yeah, that's a little bit disturbing. Now, you did have a fantastic turnout for the launch this week, including we had a speech by Lachlan Murdoch, co-chair of News Corp. Let's have a quick look.
By definition, an Australian identity must apply to all of us. But our national identity and culture are weathering constant attempts to recast Australia as something it isn't. To listen to our national broadcaster, or much of the media elite, is to hear about a uniquely racist, selfish, slavish, and monochromatic country. The reality could not be more different. We are one of the most tolerant, generous, independent, and multicultural countries in human history.
And I guess, John, that helps explain those poll results you were talking about. If you present Australia as a uniquely racist, selfish, just country built on genocide and hate, you can understand why so many people who've heard that for 30 years think we're not worth defending.
That's exactly right. And what's significant about what Lachlan Murdoch said to the IPA on Tuesday night, what Tony Abbott said, what someone like Jacinta Price said, is that it's not being heard in a lot of the Australian media. It's not being heard from the cultural elites who spend most of their time preaching to us and telling us how to live and wanting us to apologise for our skin colour or our gender or our background. It's not being taught at universities and schools. And one of the things that is really exciting for me is that when you talk to Australians about our history, when you do what the left doesn't do, which is actually compare Australia to every other country in the world, we come out pretty well. And as Tony Abbott said at our launch on Tuesday night, if you are Australian, you have won the lottery of life. And that's not an optimistic attitude that is reflected in a lot of what we hear today.
I wish I was there. I was so sorry to miss that evening. It sounds like you've got starting the fight back, and we need a fight back against the culture warriors of the left. John Roskam, thank you for joining me tonight.